So how many of you know what really happened at the meeting yesterday between Zelensky and Trump and the EU leaders, if we want to call them that? What was the result of the meeting? What was actually meant to be accomplished? And then, what was published immediately after the meeting? Shocking? Astounding? Dumbfounding? Oh, when Trump gets a hold of this, I can only imagine what he's going to feel. That's not a cup of coffee that's not going to be flown across the table. I assure you, no matter how much he may or may not be used to being stabbed in the back. Because this one is utterly astounding, and that's the story I'm going to bring you in 1 minute. So let's start here. Russia's state media, Russia-run media, TASS, Russia news agency. What did they talk about this big meeting that happened? What is their article that they publish? Trump interrupts talks with Zelensky, EU leaders to call Putin. And this is about all they publish on it. These 4 paragraphs, which basically state nothing. Except U.S. President Donald Trump interrupted his talks with Vladimir Zelensky and European leaders to call Russian President Vladimir Putin. That's it. Period. Interesting, huh? But the only person I care about is President Trump. What did he say about the meeting? Well, do you really think that I think Trump got conned? Come on, you should know me better than that by now. Doesn't change the fact of what was stated. Oh no, we're still going to cover that. And it is still astounding that this came out after the meeting. And we're going to get there, but I'm going to get you through the details. I'm going to tell you what was meant to be accomplished and what is outstanding. It's as easy as a checkerboard. It's really that simple. There's really only 3 columns of things that have to be achieved, and who's going to get what is as easy as playing, well, tic-tac-toe, and I'm going to show you that. I had a very good meeting with distinguished guests. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy of Ukraine. Macron, Melania, we went through all this already. Great. And what happened in the White House, which ended in further meetings in the Oval Office. During the meeting, we discussed security guarantees for Ukraine, which guarantees would be provided by various European countries with a coordination with the United States of America. Everyone's very happy about the possibility of peace for Russia and Ukraine. At the conclusion of the meetings, I called President Putin and began the arrangements for a meeting at a location to be determined, the trilateral meeting, or he calls it here the trilat. I called President Putin and began the arrangements for a meeting at a location to be determined between President Putin and President Zelensky. After that meeting takes place, we will have a trilat, which would be the 2 presidents plus myself. Again, this was a very good early step for a war that has been going on for almost 4 years. Vice President J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, Steve Witkoff, well, they'll handle all the details from here. But we're making progress. As I told you, this would be only 1 step in the progress. But nonetheless, some would declare, and most would declare, a step forward. Definitely not a step backwards. Let's just put it in those terms. Was this a step backwards or a step forward? Go ahead, put it in the comments below. You can take deep breaths here. This is not that tough to get through. This will not take that long, I promise you. But once I get started, I'm not going to stop. So I'm going to ask you a favor first before we go forward. Thank you all again for helping us to achieve great growth. And that was simply done by you assuring and checking that you're still subscribed to the channel. Thank you for doing that. If you're new here, welcome home. Thousands of new subscribers again recently. Welcome to Restricted Republic. This is part of our family. The other portion is at Lisa Haven, and the main portion is at restrictedrepublic.com. That's our platform that we own. That's our news channel, where we do exclusive content daily on top of all our broadcasts on all our platforms. All we do is take all the commercials and interruptions and remove them and give you stone cold hard facts. There's a reason we created that news platform, so we can give you all the news unfiltered and uncensored. And that's why it's grown every single day, and we'd love to have you there. It's one way we keep the news flowing. Another way is through great partnerships Partnerships that give you something back. I know, a novel thought, right? One of those is Chapter. Man, these folks are incredible. These are licensed Medicare professionals. Why do I do that? If you've ever tried to either get Medicare for yourself or for a loved one, it is a tangled web. Very difficult to get through. Well, these folks here, through one free phone call, a lot of people think they have the best plan. They'd be amazed how many will find out they actually don't. And through a free phone call, in under 20 minutes, you can find out if you truly do have the best plan or not. If you do, great. No harm, no foul. If you don't, what harm does a free phone call really take to make today to 805-619-5011? The average person who calls Chapter saves $1,100 a year. My subscribers have already saved thousands. That's why I absolutely love this sponsorship from Chapter. I want you to give them a call today. It doesn't take that long. Under 20 minutes to find out if you could potentially save money in a system that is designed to take from you. It's time to take something back. Give them a call today. And now, let's get back to this broadcast. Okay, so first, the heavy-hitting news. Axios decides to cover, out of everything that's happening in geopolitics, how Zelensky dressed. Axios. Trump-Zelensky summit. The suit question, again, can't make it up. But it seems everybody was really curious about that. Here's his arrival to the White House, and here's Trump's reaction. How embarrassing. How embarrassing. Little Zelensky arrived at the White House and he got complimented by Daddy for his attire. I mean, it's just, I can only imagine how embarrassing that has to be. But nonetheless, he did it to himself, so I'm not feeling so bad. Let's not worry about borders. The reshaping of Russia, the reshaping of Ukraine. Let's worry about Zelensky's suit, which he should have worn in the first place. But I digress for a moment. We'll come back to these borders. Very, very important. One of the tic-tac-toe pieces that we're going to be playing here shortly. But no, we have what was many of the warmongers, as I call them, the neocons. One being German Chancellor Merz doing exactly what I said they would do. Not talking about peace, talking about a ceasefire, which implies that this war will continue. He does exactly what I thought he would, and Giorgia Meloni, who can never control her facial expressions, gives the same facial expression I would have if I had to listen to this man actually attempt to lecture President Trump.
And let's try to put pressure on Russia, because the credibility of these efforts we are undertaking today are depending on at least a ceasefire from the beginning of the serious negotiations from next step on.
Okay, I can only listen to him so long. That's about my limit because there's a lot of facts we got to rapid fire through. Remember, tic-tac-toe board, 3 columns. We're talking about borders. Next, Trump told you what it was. Security guarantee.
The Alaska summit reinforced my belief that while difficult, peace is within reach, and I believe that in a very significant step, President Putin agreed that Russia would accept security guarantees for Ukraine, and this is one of the key.
There we go. Number 2, security guarantees. Told you this is not that difficult to get through. Now they put this into 4 sections. I would put it into 3 because there's 3 decisions. They put it into 4 because it's 4 countries. Look the other way. That's what the most important part is. Territory, security, and aid. Got it? Ukraine, Russia, Europe, and the U.S. all want 4 different things. Now, how do I think this will stack in? Because this is what it boils down to now, folks. An entire war boils down to this tic-tac-toe board. Not making light of it. It's war. It's serious. A lot of lives at stake here. But how do I think it will play out? A little bit like this. Ukraine will get nothing that it wants. Sorry, Ukraine. You lost. When you lose a war, or you're losing a war, generally you don't get anything. People really struggle with that concept. Even here in the United States, we struggle with that concept. Always a difficult one for people to consume. Russia, however, also won't get everything they want. They won't get these borders that they desire. I'll show you what that means in a few seconds here. They will, however, get, because the U.S. agrees, assurance that Ukraine will not be joining NATO. I don't believe in any way, shape, or form that's going to happen. Russia also won't get the fact that Ukraine won't get any aid. They're going to get aid in some way, shape, or form. They have to rebuild. Russia, that ain't going to happen. Europe also won't get most of what they want. They want, and Ukraine wants, the borders to go back to the way they were. Folks, I told you from the beginning, that's never going to happen. Russia has achieved what they call progress. Their borders have advanced. They've reshaped Russia, and they will achieve and maintain some of that border shift. If not, the war is going to continue. They want a defense force. Post-ceasefire, Europe, you're not going to get that. You may get some form of security, but it won't be a defense force in the shape. Now, this is the toughest one, is what does that security look like? It will be some form of European nations, maybe. So maybe we should take this and put a little portion of a dot around it, because it will exist in some form, but it will be run by Europe, and the U.S. will have very little involvement. Europe funded, Europe and U.S. supplied, maybe on the aid portion. U.S., current line of contact de facto. This is the important part. The border will shift. Russia will gain territory. Absolute yes. Ukraine will not get back into NATO. There will be security guarantees. Does that mean there will be security forces put into Ukraine? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Nobody has said that. This is the sticky point. For Ukraine, the sticky point is territory. For Russia, the sticky point is security, although some will argue it's territory also. Aid will be Europe funded. That's my play. I look forward to you in the comments below. But let's go through why I say this. Zelensky. Funding Ukraine military with 90 billion weapons package, security guarantees discussed. In other words, Russia, you can't do X, Y, and Z. If you do, then Ukraine can attack you and will assist. Whoever we is defined as. That has not been put on the paper yet. Putin desires land. I've won. I've given away a lot of lives in my military. He's taken a lot of lives in Ukraine. I'm not going to give those territories back. What territories are we talking about? Here's a portion of it. Let me show you how this all plays into this area, because I'm going to show you what I believe the new Russia will look like. It all plays into this map. Donetsk, which is smaller than Massachusetts. Putin will not give this up. Crimea, he will not give up. Donetsk has over about 4 million people. Center of some of the most brutal fighting of the war. And the Kremlin's not been able to take the entire region. Back to this map and what I believe the new Russia will look like. This is the most contested one of the most contested portions of the agreement. 3 prongs. Land. I'd love to see your comments on this. This is what I believe the new Russia will look like. This will be the new border of Russia. Ukraine won't like this. Europe won't like this. America will try to negotiate where this border ends up, but the border will change. Mark my words. It's not going back to where the EU and Ukraine want it, which is back to where it originally was. Folks, that is not going to happen. If it does, and that's what they desire, the war will continue. This is how simple this is at this point. And so Trump makes his phone call to Putin. People argue about that. Why? Because he has to arrange a summit. So he obviously gets some concession that he wants, either in security or in territory. Now we could have a meeting within 2 weeks. But what happens after the meeting? What happens? The unbelievable portion. The mainstream media, the likes of Daily Mail and HuffPost, come out. Zelensky's master stroke, just listen to this for a moment, to manipulate Trump and avoid another White House disaster. They claim that Zelensky conned Trump. They published this within seconds after the meeting. I read it and I was dumbfounded as to how anyone could potentially interpret that meeting as Zelensky conning Trump. He did what he needed to assure Trump didn't throw him out the front door, lock him out, and allow Russia to attack him forever. Amen. That's what he did. Because he had to. And avoid another White House disaster as Putin refuses to commit to peace talks. If refusing is not committing to the time, date, and place, okay, he refused. Because Trump hasn't committed to the time, date, and place yet. So I guess Trump refused it too. This is how the media spins it, just preparing for you for articles like this. Zelensky's masterstroke to win over Trump and avoid another White House. This is the same article, mind you. One, to manipulate Trump, to con Trump. The other one, to win over Trump, which is a more accurate headline because that's what he had to do. He had to win over Trump. How did he do that? Wait for this in-depth media reporting here. He wore the right outfit. Heavy-hitting journalism, folks. Step 1, he wore the right outfit. I showed you that. Step 2, he said thank you. They referenced a Washington Post article. In 4.5 minutes, the Ukrainian president thanked Trump 11 times. So he wore the right outfit and he said thank you because he didn't last time. Third step, he promised Trump a weapons deal. Okay, $100 billion, which I don't know exactly where he's going to get the money, but nonetheless, okay, that was step 3. And step 4, the letter that I covered from you, that Melania wrote to Putin, which, by the way, when Putin arrived in Alaska, read it immediately, as I told you it would be a very important letter, to stop all the killings in Ukraine. And Zelensky acknowledges that same letter, says it was so touching that his wife had something to hand back to Melania. And he handed it to Trump. And that is what the Daily Mail interpreted as conning Trump and giving Zelensky the upper hand. I can't make it up. That's literally how the mainstream media interpreted one of the most important meetings in recent modern history. Because they couldn't come up with anything negative that actually occurred. Don't worry, the HuffPost followed suit. The Don pauses meeting to phone pal Putin. I couldn't wait to click on the article to see how in-depth they went on that statement alone. So I did. And there it is. That's the whole article. To back up that headline. The Don pauses meeting to phone pal Putin. Trump pauses Zelensky meeting to call Putin. Reports. In other words, they recapped an article on CNN and the Wall Street Journal that states that Trump called Putin, which everyone knows. Heavy-hitting journalism, folks. When you're grasping for nothing, you write about nothing. Because maybe you should listen to one of the world leaders in the room. Finland's President Alexander Stubb. As a matter of fact, on a hot mic, I think it was Melania from Italy, and Trump and Alexander Stubb was across the table, and there was some jokes going across on the hot mic, and Trump looks at Stubb and says, "You know, he's a really good golfer." Well, Alexander Stubb, that man, stated, the only man who seems to be accurate so far. Giorgia Meloni also respects what Trump did and called him out for respecting what he did. But Alexander Stubb states, I think in the past 2 weeks, we've probably had more progress in ending this war than we've had in the past 3.5 years. Which I agree with. And so if you want to sit there and mock our president, Daily Mail, and state that little Zelensky conned and manipulated him because you can't come up with anything that actually went wrong over the last week in the progress towards ending the war, and you'd rather give the neocons the upper hand and say no change to borders, entry into NATO, and continual U.S. and EU aid to Ukraine so the war will continue indefinitely, is that truly the outcome you want? Could you imagine how many millions more lives would be lost if that's the outcome you truly desired? That's a sickness, folks. That's an out-and-out sickness. Yeah, we kind of keep a lighthearted tone here as much as we can to cover these really heavy-hitting articles, really heavy-hitting news right now. These are serious consequences. But at times, you got to just put it out there for you and everyone else to hear. That is sick and disturbed. And so maybe you should all back the hell off for a moment and allow progress to actually be enjoyed for a moment. And maybe you should back the hell off for a moment and compliment the man who's actually brought things forward further than anyone's been able to. And to be honest, he's the only man who could do it. So instead of calling him Putin's pal, he's the only one who could stop the bloodshed. Biden sure as hell couldn't. And nobody else may desire to. So God bless President Trump. God bless this great republic of the United States of America. I've stayed on this story for you. I'll continue to stay on this story for you. I love you all. Until next time, Godspeed and God bless. Justice Knight, signing out.